Hey Changemakers, it's Erin and Mel here, just popping in to let you know that this episode today will actually be our last for 2018. We are going to be taking a break to recharge our batteries and also get ready for next year. But we've thought that this episode was the perfect one to end our year on because our November episode is also our second birthday.
But keep calm, Changemakers, and stay on social media. We are at Human Factor Podcast on Facebook and Instagram, and at _Human Factor on Twitter. We'll be sharing social change stories, inspiration, but also some of our favorite moments over the last 2 years.
We're also going to be preparing something special for season 3 in 2019. But don't go yet. We've got a whole episode talking social change coming for you right now. Nearly half of all Australian school kids are stressed, and mindfulness might just be the way to fix it.
Welcome to the Human Factor, the show where we explore social change through the eyes of social entrepreneurs. My name is Melanie Russen, her name is Erin McKay, and we are your hosts. Erin and I met when working in the nonprofit sector. We became really curious about social change and the people behind it, so we've created the Human Factor podcast. If you're starting or running a social enterprise, or maybe you're interested in stories of good or how social change happened, then you're in the right place. Stick around and have a listen. Today, we talk to Nicola Bone. Nicola is the founder of Urban Bliss Yoga. As a yoga teacher, Nicola teaches her fair share of yoga classes all over Southeast Queensland, right here in Australia. But with a background in education, she's on a mission to use yoga to improve students' well-being and resilience. But shockingly, 1 in every 7 young Australians aged 4 to 17 years suffer from mental illness. So 2 years ago, Nicola created Sound Off for Schools, a silent yoga and meditation class for school. By integrating yoga, meditation, and mindfulness into the school curriculum, Nicola and her team hope to give students the tools they need to thrive. Hi, Nicola. Thanks for joining us on the Human Factor today. Please fill in the gap in my intro and tell us how you would describe yourself.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share the Urban Bliss story with the Human Factor. I'm really grateful for the invitation. So not too many holes in the introduction to fill in. I was a classroom teacher for 12 years in high schools in Brisbane, and over that time I began to witness a really significant increase in the number of students suffering from mental illness, ranging from mood disorders, anxiety to depression, and they were all really in the classroom. It became quite obvious that those illnesses were really debilitating for students and also very disruptive to productive learning. So that observation just in my own classroom was really heartbreaking to me, and I needed to find out why that was happening and why it was such a trend, it seemed, across all of my classrooms. And so I took myself off and I enrolled myself in a Master of Public Health, and I chose to major in epidemiology, which is simply just the study of the burden of disease on population. So it's kind of like population health, and I did that to begin the process of, I guess, trying to understand the burden on young people and consequently on the education system. And I also wanted to find out ways in which schools could offer a platform for early intervention and change, and because I was seeing around the world that schools were adopting I guess reform. It was really quite radical to use meditation in a classroom from what I could see. So in my final semester of my study, I started to see that amongst all of the literature, especially on adolescent mental health and research, Australia was a really clear leader in research, but definitely not in practice or intervention. So we just weren't implementing the proven strategies into our communities, and that was really jarring to me. And I wondered why. And so I guess that whole of that there was definitely a need. So it was really obvious to me what needed to be done. I needed to come up with a way to make mindfulness education accessible to schools and maybe almost acceptable, because it was still schools are still quite conservative places in Australia. And so I guess from my experience in the education, as an educator and in schools, I was able to create sound off for schools, and I can tell you more about how the program works later on. So I guess I describe myself as someone who seeks to understand problems and then maybe a person who takes action where there's a need. And I'm also a very passionate educator who dreams of seeing mindfulness and meditation strategies used in every classroom every day.
I love it. Like at my old organization, we used to do a meditation before every team meeting, and I really feel like it makes such a huge difference. But as the founder of a yoga business, I'm sure that no one day is the same for you, but try, if you can, tell us what a typical day might look like for Nicola.
Yeah, it's definitely been a huge change for me this year doing this full time. I guess the school day is very structured and sometimes a little bit like Groundhog Day. So a typical day now begins with teaching a morning yoga class in a Brisbane studio, and then I find the time directly after teaching very productive. So I put that time aside to sit at my desk and do all of that administration stuff that sometimes can get lost or fall down on the to-do list. And then I do spend a lot of time planning for future public events in urban spaces, which is kind of the way that the message of or the concept gets out there. So we hold public events for anyone. And then another big part of the administration side is booking schools and contacting schools for sessions. And then most days I'll actually be on campus on visiting a school and running a session. So most days I do get to sneak in my own yoga practice as well.
Oh, that's great. Actually, I was looking at Erin as you were talking about booking schools, because Erin used to be a little bit in that space. I mean, a fair bit in that space. So what did you see as the best way to get into the school? Because it's not necessarily an easy process. As you said, they tend to be quite traditional.
Yeah, absolutely. That's been quite a challenge navigating the busy landscape of the school. When you're contacting a school, you almost just become another source of noise. So I have found the most effective way to be having knowing someone in a school, and they then almost become an advocate for it, and they move the booking through from being interested when they see it or when they hear about it. And then they tend to be the person that takes it all the way through to fruition. So it's really finding those people within schools who are, I guess, believers in the purpose and the why behind the concept, and they are my strongest allies in getting the program out to more schools.
Definitely. And I mean, as someone who teach at university, I can, definitely relate to the stress that uni students have, when it's the exam and things like that. But I was actually, quite shocked to see that this happened in young Australians as well. So my question to you is, what is the one thing that most people don't know or understand about the mental health crisis in our young Australians?
I think most people are quite shocked about, I guess, the statistics. You mentioned them in the introduction. It's quite alarming to know that, in a classroom of 28 children, there are at least 4 of them sitting in front of you really suffering and unable to regulate their nervous system and therefore unable to learn. And if you look at each classroom as I guess like a micro population, and that I think people, when they can see it on that scale, they understand that it's at epidemic levels, and it is our imperative to do something about it. And I guess the other thing that I'm finding, just because I've been across the literature, is that perhaps in Australia we don't yet see schools as the perfect platform for intervention and change, where I mean, coming from the school environment, you can see that a school can create a coherent environment, a climate that's more potent than any single influence in a child's life. So for at least 6 hours a day, that environment can override almost anything else in a child's life. So it can become schools can become a sanctuary for children who are suffering from any background. So I just think there's a slow shift towards opening the doors to it in schools, but it is happening. It's definitely happening. It's exciting to be part of.
So Mel and I both love yoga, and we know what it's done for our own lives, and we love the idea of using it for young people. So tell us a bit more about the story behind Sound Off for Schools and how it came to be.
So once I kind of decided it's simple, I just need to bring this practice into the classroom, I came back from completing my yoga teacher training and began to just simply implement the breathing strategies into my own classroom as a way of allowing students to regulate their nervous system to prepare for learning. So at the start of each class, we'd do between 4 and 6 minutes of just simply sitting in their chair, different kinds of breathing strategies that are used in yoga, but they're not specific to yoga, just mindfulness breathing. And that was a huge success, but I noticed as students became quite skilled in it, there was almost this, it's kind of like in the chaos of a really busy high school, there was always something pulling their attention away from the meditative guidance or the brain state they were really desperate to get into, because they felt such reprieve when they found it. And so the wireless noise cancelling headphones, which the students wear, were the solution to this, and that allowed the attention of each student to be held more consistently through that time, and it allowed for really effective teaching. And now the program can happen on scale. So an entire cohort can be taught a strategy in one session, and it's incredible to see how their attention is actually captivated and they're not distracted by their peers or anything going on around them. And so, yeah, just from seeing that transformation in my own students was unbelievable, and for some it's become a daily practice for them. And now I think you might argue that you kind of, making it a little bit easier for them by putting those headphones on. But when they're learning how to do it, it just takes away, I guess, one less barrier for them to become aware and follow their breath. And it's very effective.
I just love how your sense of observation. So because obviously you're coming from this 12 years, working in high school as an educator, and how you're using this to monitor, how the students are doing through what you are offering. It's a beautiful story. Earlier you've touched a little bit on your typical day, and you've mentioned that you offer, your yoga session in the morning, and then you go to your desk and work on your social enterprise. So my question for you is, as a business with purpose, how do you balance kind of the day-to-day work of being a yoga teacher with your social mission to help young Australians?
So operating as a business with a purpose, I've found it's actually a really effective frame to have in decision making and strategy, and so whenever you're kind of stuck in the day-to-day business decisions, you go back to the why, and does a decision or does a strategy or a goal align with the purpose, and the purpose is delivering mindfulness education to young Australians. So having that why is really important and really great to have to fall back on when you're really stuck and trying to find that balance. And I guess being very clear about it makes it quite easy, and communicating that why means that everyone that I come into contact with, they know that they can be part of this global imperative as well. They can be part of that story. And I guess an example of this has been, in the past we've had quite a number of different organisations approach us for collaboration, and some of them, that they're successful businesses in their own right, but if their purpose or their message to the world is in conflict with Urban Bliss or with Sound Off for Schools, I find it really easy to decline a collaboration or a partnership, because I think it becomes quite confusing to people when you're not sure about your purpose, and I think for someone who's interested in social change, it's a very important part of staying true to the reason behind why it all started and what I really want to achieve with it.
Absolutely. I love that, like, just stay focused on your mission. What would you say has been the most challenging part of developing the Sound Off for Schools program so far?
I would say the most challenging part of the journey was jumping in, taking the risk, and at the start of this year, I took leave from the classroom to roll out the program, and as far and as wide as I could, and that was really horrifying because I'm secretly very risk averse, and so it was. Some days it was very exciting, others it was horrifying, and so that was a huge challenge. One I don't regret taking though.
So through this challenge, what would you say was your biggest lesson learned, and your advice to our listener who are operating a social enterprise? So something that they can apply to their cause.
I'd say the biggest lesson I've learned is to be very clear about your purpose, about your why, and then to return to that at all times, at any fork in the road, at any big decision. Go back to why are you doing this? What's your purpose? And maybe kind of avoid the very attractive lure of maybe more business or more clients. If it's not the right fit, it will steer you off your path.
I think that's really relevant, especially, like, I work in the charity world, the fundraising world, and every organisation I've worked for has had the issue of mission creep, where they are maybe rolling something out because of the money or the client. And I think it's so important to stay true to why you exist. So what I'm wondering is because I'm just imagining myself in high school. And I'm just wondering, what sort of feedback do you get from students about the program?
So the feedback from students is often one of surprise. They're surprised how much they love it. And they're often there's also an overwhelming sense of relief, as many of them they don't have that deliberate time or space gifted to them throughout their day. So the relief comes from just being able to become aware of how much tension and worry they're holding in their physical body. And when they're starting out, it is more about attaching emotion to physical body, and they often students talk about this weight in their shoulders or anxiety in their throat or their belly or really uncomfortable hips. And so a really common response from especially older students is this sense of reprieve, like they've been able to just take a big sigh of relief. And the across the board, we deliver it from prep right through to year 12. So a very common response is just not knowing what it feels like to breathe fully and deeply. And then I guess as kind of middle school, the response from middle school students is fairly commonly around just having a chance to not have to worry about what anyone else is doing or thinking. And they often talk about feeling like they're always on guard at school, and that relief comes from just giving them time and space and allowing them to kind of shift from the constant doing to being. And that's a really vital part of their development and mental health. I recall a student, a little year 2 student. There was a cohort of about 80 year 2 students, and they'd done a 60-minute session, which is a huge ask for that age, but they were absolutely incredible. And she rushed forward to me at the end of the session, and she was kind of quite frantic. She said, "Excuse me, miss, excuse me, can I take you with me?" And she was, of course, talking about my voice in the headphones, and she was holding onto the headphones, and she just said, "Life is just so crazy out there," pointing outside to the playground, to the bustling noise of the playground. So for students who, maybe tend to be introverts or are quiet or are quite anxious, school it's a place of lots of noise and busyness and doing. And so you can see them just shift into this state of, I can just breathe.
I really like the fact that the skills that they're learning with you, it's something that they will be able to use through life, because this ability to self-care, self-regulate, like you were talking about, is something that I wish I learned earlier on in my life.
Yeah.
It's nice to have something in school that is actually can be used.
Yeah.
It's like, I really wish I'd learned how to do my tax in school, but they didn't teach me that. So I can see the really powerful effect that the Sound Off for Schools program can have for young people. And what I'm wondering how do you ensure that kids from all backgrounds, including those in low socioeconomic or disadvantaged areas, can have access to this wonderful program?
So the program currently is accessed by schools who choose to book for their students, and that's a user pay basis. So, and I know that does place a financial barrier for some schools and some students. So we're in the process of applying for funding to ensure that the program can be rolled out to all schools regardless of their background. And with this funding, I have grand dreams of taking the program to places like outback Queensland and the more remote areas in our state that sometimes miss out. So stay tuned for that.
I love it because, you've mentioned your master in public health, which has been my path as well. And so you'll be able to provide some evidence, I guess, when you apply for that funding, because you across the evidence for that as well.
Absolutely.
So we are coming towards the end of the interview. So our final questions we like to just do as a bit of a lightning round. So please just tell us the first thing that comes to your mind, which may be about yoga or it might not be. So with that in mind, what are you most excited about today?
The way schools are getting on board, slowly but surely.
It's a slow burn. As someone who's run a schools program, it's a slow burn.
What was the one thing that was holding you back from starting Sound Off for Schools?
Fear and funds. Fear of failure and having the funds to just take a risk.
What do you see as being Sound Off for Schools' biggest challenge in the next 12 months?
Growth that stays true to purpose and mission. and that's sustainable.
You've shared some great insight today. So what I wonder is, what is the best advice that you have ever received?
Trust your gut.
Love it. Sadly, we are wrapping up now. And if you could leave us with a few words that our listeners would really take to heart today, what would they be?
I would invite your listeners to join this silent revolution to rewrite our nation's educational story, and so that learning can become a really deeply relational experience for students where they're deliberate, they're mindful, they're fully connected, and they're empowered to navigate their way through their own internal world and the complex world out there of development at this time. Now more than ever, we need young people to come back home through feeling and thinking and being, so that they can function at an optimal level.
Just before we let you go, so tell us the best way to reach out to you. So if someone wants to get their school involved, but also to follow you on social media.
Yeah, so the best way to stay up to date is via social media. The handle is at Urban Bliss Australia, and there's contact details there. There's also a website, urbanblissaustralia.com.au.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us on The Human Factor, Nicola.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
The Goody Bag.
Let's get ready to Goody Bag. Ding, ding.
Love your intro, Erin. They are the best.
What is in your Goody Bag, Mel?
Okay, so for those of you who haven't heard, I am now officially doing a PhD on gynecological cancers. Woo! No,
Mel's going to be a doctor.
but this is the early days, so ask me again in a few months and it might be a different reaction. But the excitement is there. And so I'm following a few Instagram accounts at the moment that are about cancer, and cancer patient. And I came across this Better in Company account on Instagram, and they're really lovely. So basically, this is the wife of a current fighter. So this little couple, Jesse and Tommy. How cute. So they've been married, they were married, for 10 months and then obviously fighting, cancer together for that time. But she put together, some beautiful, stationery. So she has a bit of a book, which she called the Better Book, which is really about getting yourself organized as you're going through cancer. But also some beautiful cards. And so some of my favorites are like, for example, best nurses ever, even though you stabbed me. Or little things like, I heard your ovaries are being little bitches. So they're just beautiful card when, you do hear of a friend who is going through cancer, and it's really hard to find the right words. And this kind of just bring a little bit of joy and I guess a little bit of humor through a tough time, because it is okay to, have a little bit of a lighter tone at times. It is a very serious issue, but this kind of make it easier to go through such a difficult time.
I think humor is really important as a way of dealing with emotions and feelings. Like, some people think that you have to be really serious, but I think that this is a beautiful way to say to your friend, like, I'm here for you, but let's still have a bit of a laugh,
I agree. So you can find them on Instagram. And if you know someone who's been affected by cancer, then you can go to their Etsy shop to go and shop for their product. But beautiful product there. And what are you putting into the goodie bag, Erin?
Well, I'm putting in something a little bit, I guess, odd. It's a book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying.
I've heard about that.
It's a great book. I've just finished it on audiobook, actually, because that's how cool I am. I listen to my books. So it's a book by a woman called Bronnie Ware. And basically Bronnie was a palliative care nurse. She's not like trained as a nurse. She just sort of fell into the work. But she wrote the book after she actually wrote a blog post in 2009 named The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And the book is sort of an extended version of it. And a lot of people, when I've told them that that's what I'm reading at the moment, they've been like, well, that's depressing. And I have to disagree. I actually think it's a really uplifting book with just beautiful messages about how, rather than it being about dying, I think it's really about living. And so I'd really recommend it. It's not a long book. And if you're sort of like, I don't have time for a whole book because I'm out there living, well, it's also a blog post. So you can read the blog post, which is shorter. So Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. I just think it was really well written and something that we need to talk about. We do need to talk about dying a little bit more in our culture because it's the only thing certain in life.
And so what was one of the 5?
One of them was, oh gosh, put me on the spot there, but definitely about more time with friends and family, more time. Oh, I think one was about less time worrying about what other people think.
I love that one.
Yeah. And just they're all probably, I guess, like what you might expect as a regret, but that doesn't mean that people don't abide by them. So I think it's really important to hear and her point of view around it.
There you go.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed it, please hit subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes. We'd recommend 5 stars. Then head over to our page, The Human Factor Podcast, on Instagram and Facebook and join in the conversation. Tell us what you thought of this episode today. And if you have any thoughts or insights to add to anything Nicola said, leave us a comment.
Or find us on Twitter at Human Factor, or read our blog at humanfactor.com.au. This show is just one part of a community that really wants to grow social change. So if you have an idea for a topic or person that you'd like us to interview, please let us know.
You're all awesome, and we'll see you next time.